Hello, and welcome back to another action packed episode of 100 Yards of Football Sports Talk Radio. I'm your producer, Jeremiah Long, and joining me to talk about Jerry Rice, a man who needs no introduction, but we're going to give him one of the best. And the way that we do that is by bringing in the best, including our founder and host, Mr. Vincent Turner, and the man I'm speaking to right now, a legend in his own right, Mr. Harper LeBel. How's it going, man?
Well, great. And we're going to talk about the greatest of all time, if you don't mind me saying so. There are plenty of guys out there, Jeremiah, that we've had a chance to talk about, and many of them in their own way are fantastic players, difference makers. But is there anyone that you can say that is as good, if not better, than Jerry Lee Rice? It's just amazing what we've learned and what we're going to share here today.
Absolutely. And Mr. Turner, so glad to have you here as well. When I think about Jerry Rice, I cannot stop thinking about our show, because what we do is we bring these legendary players to light and talk about their careers. We keep it on the field. We keep it happy and fun. We take about the stats. We talk about the players, and I love that for our show. So without further ado, take it away, guys.
Well, thank you much. And Jeremiah, we appreciate all that you do for the show. You're a producer, you're an engineer, and you bring us in. So thank you for that. And Vincent, many years ago, when I first started kind of looking at the history of the game, there were debates that people were having. Who's the best here? Who's the best there? Now, we can argue numbers back and forth. We can argue non-numbers back and forth. But the question of who would you want to start a franchise with? Lawrence Taylor, Reggie White, a quarterback, whoever it is. Some would say Johnny Unitas or Otto Graham if you're from Cleveland and say he was the absolute best. You could say Joe Montana. You could say Steve Young if you were a 49er fan. But is there any doubt at all that if you needed a touchdown, if you needed the best at his position, could you go anywhere outside of talking about Jerry Rice?
Well, me growing up, there was two players that, actually one player that I considered that I even put in the rim with Jerry Rice, and that was Garrett Sayers. Chicago Bears, the Kansas coming. If you go back and look at his film in the 60s, and I think Gale had a 6-touchdown game. Oh, excuse me, Mr. Sayers had a 6-touchdown game, I believe, December the 12th, 1965 against the 49ers. He, at that time, me and being 5 years old, was the most explosive football player I've ever seen in my life. And if you go back to that film, the way he scored touchdowns was just unbelievable. Size, speed, quickness. That would be the only other human being that I put beside Jerry Rice. Back to you, Hart.
Well, Gale, obviously, for many different reasons, was a special player. And so is Jerry. So there's no wrong answer, folks. But if you want to just look at numbers, we can do that. But we're going to give you a little bit of the background of the man. You know a lot about him. If you've watched any football at all, people are still talking about him. And his record-setting pace, his hard work, the ethic that he would take, his competitive nature, all of that is stuff that is well known and documented. We'll talk a lot about that, but we'll also just discuss some of the things that you may not know. For example, born on October 13th, 1962 in Starkville, Mississippi, Jerry had very humble beginnings. They lived in Crawford, did the Rices. He was the number 6 of 8 children. His father, Joe, was a bricklayer, construction guy. And early on in Jerry's life, occasionally he would go visit his dad along with maybe his brothers or sisters, and they would help his father lay bricks. So Jerry learned to catch bricks before he learned to catch footballs. But it was not an easy upbringing for Jerry. Not a lot of money around the house. In fact, Jerry would complain at times and say, we don't have anything to eat. I don't have any spare clothes. But the family did the best that they could. And growing up, especially at the elementary school level, Jerry learned to run a little bit. He learned to take care of his body. And high school days, for example, Jerry went to B. Elmore High School in Octok, Mississippi. Small town, only 600 people there. So the high school team was a very, very small unit. And Mrs. Rice, Jerry's mom, Eda B., would not let him play. She didn't want him to be playing football. And he liked the game, Vincent. He loved football growing up, but he liked playing out in the street or out on a patch of grass somewhere. He hadn't played competitive football. And that's when you put on a helmet, you've got coaching, you got referees. He gets to high school, does not play anything his freshman year. At the beginning of his sophomore year, he and one of his buddies were cut in class. They were skipping. And the assistant principal catches him. And he says, "Hey, you kids come back here." Well, Jerry got afraid like anyone would, and he started running away. The assistant principal chases him, and Jerry runs a little faster. And so does the assistant principal. And then so does Jerry. Impressed with his speed, once he caught up to him, or at least caught him at school the next day, the rumor has it there's two different sides to the story, Vincent. And one is that Jerry ended up getting punished, and the assistant principal, knowing full well that he had one of the fastest kids out in the school, made him go to football practice. And as punishment, he had to go to practice for a couple of days. The coach liked him, and he made the team. The other rumor is that he ended up being told, the assistant principal tells Charles Davis, the head coach, "Hey, there's this kid out here, and he's lightning quick. You may want to add him to the team." So I'm not exactly sure. We'll have to ask Jerry one day when he comes on 100 Yards of Football, and the invitation is outstanding. We'd love to have you. But little things like that help get this man started. And his mother, Eda B., just at one point or another realized, you know what? I was just fighting against something that I wasn't going to win. Jerry was eventually going to play football. And boy, when he did things change.
I think when you look at his career and look where he came from, you mentioned a point that his family didn't really have much. I think there was a certain type of motivation that was built in him very early. You got to understand he had an oldest brother that went and played football at Jackson State, so he had something to look up to. But the one thing that impressed me about Jerry Rice, he had a dream that he really wanted to play football in Mississippi State. Loved the school, but they didn't recruit him. He ended up in Mississippi Valley. And two people who I think played a very important part in him being great. One, Gloucester Richardson, who played at Jackson State, former NFL receiver, told him at Jackson State, "Man, you got a chance to be very special. You can play on the next level." And two, I want to give kudos today. If anybody knows about HBC football in the SWAC, my love goes out, and a lot of people can understand this. Archie, the gunslinger Cooley. That's the guy that made Jerry Rice. And I want to put that on the air today because he had a system that he said, "Hey, I got this young man right here. I see what he can do. What I'm going to do, I'm going to invent an offense that nobody can defend. 5 receiver set with no running backs. But I got a stallion on the outside. And I know nobody could guard him man to man." And you can look at what he did in the SWAC, the stats, and why he won the first round in the 1985 draft, and why he had a great career with the San Francisco 49ers. But the one thing about Jerry Rice that when I think about him, and I don't mean no respect to anybody, he's from the state of Mississippi, where my mother, Mrs. Agnes Turner, grew up at. And you got to understand what I'm finna say here. It's a mindset with those people. And it's kind of rubbed off on me a little bit. That's why I'm still trying to follow my dream here. Those people are hungry. Those people are not intimidated. And they don't let no one stop them from their dream. Back to you, Harper.
Well, you've mentioned a lot of great names there, and we'll discuss that. In the high school realm, Jerry ended up playing basketball. He ran track. He was a high jumper. In his junior year, he met his quarterback, Willie Gillespie, and that kind of changed things for him. They were 17-2 between his junior and senior year. 17-2. He was all-state his senior year. He ended up catching 50 passes and had 30 touchdowns. So the relationship with Willie Gillespie was something that really changed his progression, if you will. You mentioned, Vincent, that there weren't any schools really that gave scholarship offers to him. Now, I'm not sure what his academics were like, but from an athletic standpoint, Jerry could bring it. And he wanted to go to Mississippi State. And again, he was recruited, but they didn't offer him a scholarship. So that was the difference. And you mentioned Gloucester Richardson. There was a wide receiver coach at Mississippi Valley State who started to teach him the techniques of running, how to run and keep your hands moving, keep your hands up, turning your head around, different techniques that would make him a better receiver. And boy, did things change for him. He had 30 receptions his freshman year, 428 yards, 2 touchdowns. Okay, right? Then he met Willie Totten. Willie helped change things. They were called the Satellite Express between the two of them. While he was at Mississippi Valley State his junior year, he catches 102 passes for 1,400 yards, 14 touchdowns. He had 24 receptions in one game against Southern. His senior year, he had 112 receptions for 1,800 yards and 27 touchdowns. Absolutely amazing. They averaged about 60 points per game. So one of the things that Jerry did when he was evaluating what it was going to take in getting from high school to college was looking at the offenses. So good for him, his competitive nature and the things that we would see later on in his life. These were early signs that these were important things to him. But 60 points a game, and he ended his career at Mississippi Valley State with 301 receptions, 4,600 yards, and 50 touchdowns. That was a record that stayed in place for the NCAA, not just Mississippi Valley, until 2006. So absolutely amazing how he was able to turn it on. And in the Blue-Gray game, which was on Christmas Day, this is right after his senior season, he had 4 receptions for 101 yards. He had a 60-yard touchdown there, and he was declared the MVP of that game. And that's really where where Bill Walsh ended up seeing him up close and in person and decided, even though they were going to win the Super Bowl that year, the playoffs were just beginning, but he was the missing piece to the 49er offensive puzzle. He had the ability to get deep and he could catch over the middle. So those were a couple of things that Bill noticed. And before we go into his days with the 49ers, anything that I missed, Vincent, in terms of his high school or collegiate time that you found noteworthy during your research?
Well, my first knowledge of Jerry Rice was me being in, I hate to mention the 901, back home attending University of Memphis, trying to get a degree in teaching after I had graduated from Arkansas. And as I said, I had a friend that played football at Alcorn State. His name was Lawrence King, who's not with us. And he brought attention to me that year in 1982. He said, you know what, man, it's a gentleman down there in Mississippi Valley State by the name of Jerry Rice. He's not a big guy right now, but I think when it's all said and done, he's going to go to the National Football League and be one of the greatest players that ever played the game. And I'm looking at him saying, okay, Lawrence is attended Alcorn State. He's actually played against Jerry when Jerry was a true freshman. And I'm saying, okay, because at the time we don't really take the HBCU competition that serious. So I said, you know what? I'm going to see what he's going to do to Tennessee State that year. And that Tennessee State team in 1982, why bring them up? They had several players that went to the NFL. Hall of Famer Richard Dent, big-time running back Larry Killebrew, Mike Jones, wide receiver with the Minnesota Vikings, Steve Moore that started with the New England Patriots, Walter Tate, Golden Tate's father. I think everybody knows that. So I said that was a very talented Tennessee State team that ended up winning the Black National Championship that year in 82. I'm going to see what he's going to do in that game. Well, Tennessee State beat Valley 63-41. But Jerry Rice, I believe his stat line was 13 receptions for 181 yards, 2 touchdowns. I said, okay, I'm going to start following this young man. Then, of course, what you just said, Harp, outstanding junior year, outstanding senior year. Then I said, what are you going to do against Alcorn State his senior year? Biggest football game in the state of Mississippi. Couldn't be played on Saturday in Mississippi Valley, so they moved the game to Jackson, the Mississippi Memorial Stadium. 62,000, over 30 NFL scouts. He going against Isaac Hope. He going against Milton Mack. He put on the show. I think he had close to 160 yards receiving, and I said, okay, this guy got a chance to maybe go to the next level. Then interest with Bill Walsh. Bill Walsh, San Francisco was playing a game in Houston and saw him on TV and fell in love with him. Then you brought up a good, excellent point, Harp. The Blue-Gray game. I'm in the house, and I see what he does in that game. Most MVP, good information by the legend himself, Mr. Harper, LeBel. Then when he got to the NFL, he went first round. I said, okay, he going to a team that already knows about winning. They already got a serious offense in place. They got a quarterback that's going to be a legend, and a running back, Roger Craig, and a veteran receiver in Dwight Clark, and some defensive players from Ronnie Lott. And how is he going to fit in there? That was a very tough situation to go into because the 49ers were about excellence and winning. Back to you, Harper.
Yeah, the whole story in and of itself with the 49ers is pretty amazing. The Bill Walsh incident, Bill said, we got to go get him. And remember, as a Super Bowl champion, you pick last. And back then they had 30 teams in the league, so they were the 30th pick. And what Bill ended up doing is with Eddie DeBartolo, with the general managers, everybody, they decided to make a trade. They knew that Dallas was interested in it, and Dallas was picking 17th. So what they did is they ended up making a trade. Jerry was still available, and the 49ers traded their first, their second, and their third round pick for that season to New England. That's what New England gets, is the first, second, and third. And then in return, the 49ers got a first round pick and then the third round pick that New England had. So there was a one additional player on top of switching spots, which actually turned out to be okay for the Patriots. But I thought they would have gotten more out of it than what they did. But anyways, they trade back to the Patriots, and Jerry Rice becomes a San Francisco 49er. He said he didn't want to be disappointed and not get selected. Jerry was always looking at things and kind of playing that chess thing in his head. And he said, instead of being disappointed, I didn't want to go to where the draft was, which ESPN was starting to broadcast those. You had Mel Kiper, you had Chris Berman. They were all talking about different things. They'd show highlights, and not wanting to be disappointed, he didn't go. But he still was selected. And he earned the nickname Fifi because he had kind of a funny hairdo. But it was soon afterwards that the 49er players started to realize, hey, this kid works hard and he just does his job. He didn't have a whole lot of receptions his first year. And by the way, there was a little bit of a challenge that he had from a contractual standpoint. When the season was just getting ready to start, Jerry was not contracted. He ended up getting about a $1.6 million deal. But back in those days, players weren't slotted the same way that they are right now. In other words, if let's just say it's $1 for the number one pick, the second guy gets about anywhere from 99 cents to 95 cents. And then the third guy gets from 95 to about 92. You got to negotiate. And then the fourth, everyone has a little slot, and it's all performed in a way that it makes it very easy. You don't have to do a whole lot of negotiating. You don't even really need to have an agent because you just need to know what those numbers are, and you got to work your best to get as high as you can versus getting the lower end of that bracket. But Jerry had a little bit of an issue there. He ended up signing a 5-year deal, and his rookie year kind of struggled a little bit. Had a couple drops and wasn't the guy that he turned out to be. But here's one thing that Pat Summerall, during a game near the end of the season, said something to the effect of, I got the direct quote. Pat, hey, when this guy is finished, he said, he will be considered one of the best wide receivers to ever play this game. So people were starting to recognize early on that this guy had something a little bit different. He was 6'2", about 200 pounds. He wasn't skinny, but he was lean. But he wasn't the fastest guy in the field, but he was fast. He wasn't the quickest guy you've ever seen, but boy, was he quick. He didn't have the best hands you may have ever seen in your life, but boy, he had great hands. He had a little bit of all of it. And Vincent, that's the thing that I think even very early on, your friend tells you a story, hey, you better watch this kid. Pat Summerall tells the nation, along with John Madden in the booth, hey, this guy could be something else. And boy, did he turn out to be one of the greatest of all times.
That was a situation his rookie year that is embedded in my head. I can't remember. I was watching the 49ers play a game. I don't know if it was against the Falcons. He dropped a couple of passes in that game. And he comes over to the sideline, and he's distraught. Actually, it looked like he's crying. A gentleman walks up to him, and he tells him, hey, man, get it together. I believe in you. when it's all said and done, you're going to be the greatest receiver that played in this game. I promise you, it was Ronnie Lott. And from that standpoint, it seemed like Jerry Rice changed. Now think about this, a Hall of Fame hard-hitting cornerback / safety who had an outstanding career at USC goes up and tells a rookie from Stockville, Mississippi, by the way, Mississippi Valley State, his rookie season, man, get it together because you're going to be the greatest that played this game at the receiver position. And I don't have to say no more. Look at his career. Back to you, Harper.
One of the things when he first gets to the 49ers is you'll notice in the middle, thank you, Jeremiah, for getting these pictures together. The one in the middle with the red top and the green pants is a Mississippi Valley State. He wore number 88, and he wanted to, but Freddie Solomon was wearing number 88 there. So when he gets to San Francisco, the number that was available to him that he wanted to pick in honor of Steve Largent, he picked number 80. In that first season, he had 49 receptions, 927 yards, 3 touchdowns. At the end of that first year, and the 49ers went to the playoffs and 13 of the years that he was there. It's unbelievable how good they were, how consistent they were. But he decided he was going to get in that playbook. The West Coast offense, which Bill Walsh ran, is a little bit different. Instead of saying 628 with a 6 route, a 2 route, and an 8 route, you had pictures that were made from words. For example, one of my favorite plays is 23 Texas H-scat. So Texas is a picture of a route that you need to understand. There's no words to express what everybody was doing. But Jerry decided during that offseason he's going to get in better shape, and he is going to get into the playbook, and what a difference it made. 86 receptions in that next year in 1986. And we'll talk about the 87 in just a second. But that was a strike year, strike shortened year. And Jerry started to take off. And Joe Montana realized this kid's something special. I'm going to get him the ball. Yes, I'm going to get it to Roger Craig or to Bill Rathman or to Ricky Waters or to a host of running backs that they had over the years. But the one consistency that Joe had during most of that time, especially after Dwight Clark decided to retire, especially after Freddie Solomon started getting a little bit older, is he had this number 80 kid. And boy, was it, did it pay tremendous dividends. You could throw long, you could throw deep, you could throw over the middle, you could throw to the outside. Jerry would come through. And again, after that talk with Ronnie Lott and some of the other guys on that team, Vincent, the sky was the limit for Jerry.
You look at what he did in all the great seasons that he had in pro football, but the one season that sticks out to me, and you just mentioned it, was the strike season. 12 games, 65 receptions, 1,078 yards, 22 touchdowns receiving. 1 he scored on the reverse. But remember, Joe Montana got hurt that year, first game of the year, and Jeff Kemp came in. And then the Monday night game against the Washington Redskins, where the 49ers lost 14-6. But I believe the Redskins secondary, Darrell Green, Barry Wilburn, and he had 12 receptions for 204 yards. Every time the moment was big, Super Bowl against the Bengals, Super Bowl against the Chargers, playoff game in the mid-90s against the Cowboys when he caught that touchdown at the end of the first half. Larry Brown, 20 yards off of him, and he still beat him deep in the corner of the end zone. It's so many great memories and situations. We can talk about this young man right here. And then we talk about the argument of great receivers. And I've had a conversation over the years. Everybody want to say Calvin Johnson, Randy Moss, Terrell Owens. Jerry Rice couldn't play in this era because some question his speed. But I asked one question here, is that he played in an era like you, Harp, that was very physical, had some great defensive teams, and he was able to do all that. But the one caveat that I love about Jerry Rice is that The facts don't lie. Randy Moss might have been great. Terrell Owens might have been great. Kevin Johnson, but this guy scored 208 touchdowns. That's some serious production. That's the best of the best. And when people say how great you are, I always go to the former coaches or the former players. Sid Gilman, he's the best that ever done it. The legendary man out of Houston, Texas, by way of Prairie View University, Mr. Otis Taylor. They say he the best that ever done it. All the coaches in the SWAC, Mario Kasem, Eddie Robinson, John Meredith, and of course, the lamb in it all, the great legendary Bill Walsh. I don't have to say no more. Look at the gentleman's record. And Harp was so great about this today. You was drafted in the same draft with him and you saw him up close and personal. That's what makes the Stamp Hill 100 Yards football so serious and so grateful. Back to you, Mr. Harper LeBel.
Yeah, Jerry was something else now. He would, when I played here with Atlanta couldn't wait for him to retire. He probably had more records against the Falcons. As if you took his numbers against the Falcons and turned around and said that this is what, I mean, he would have had seasonal highs against Atlanta. But obviously he struck fear, not just in Atlanta, but everywhere he went. On the sideline, you stop what you're doing to watch it. And certainly happened on many occasions. All right, before we go, we're just going to give some of the accolades that Jerry had so vigorously worked for. 3-time Super Bowl champion. He was the Super Bowl MVP in Super Bowl 23. Twice he was the NFL Offensive Player of the Year, both in the 87, that strike year, and in 93. He was 10 times a first-team All-Pro. Second team All-Pro only once in 2002. He went to 13 Pro Bowls. He led the NFL as the receptions leader in 1990 and 96. He was 6 times NFL leading yards receiver. He was the scoring leader in 1987. He's a member of the All-Decades team in the 1980s and in the 90s. He's a member of the 75th anniversary all-time team. He's a member of the 100th anniversary all-time team. Burt Bell Award, 1987. All-Rookie team back in 1985. He is a member of the 49ers Hall of Fame. His number has been retired. He's a member of the College Football Hall of Fame. That happened in 2006. And in 2010, he was a member of the NFL Hall of Fame. He has at least 13 NFL records still to this day. So Jerry Rice, obviously, is one of the greatest players of all time. We don't need to tell you that. You can just figure it out for yourself. We're just confirming that the things about him that everybody else was saying, from this little Starkville, Mississippi kid that turned out to be one of the hardest workers that you'll ever want to see. The day after a Super Bowl, he's at the facility working out, running routes, getting ready for the next year. Final thoughts, Vincent?
We can say great football players has played in the National Football League, and we always use this term to GOAT. Tom Brady's won, 7 Super Bowls? There's no question about it. He deserves that honor. But for me, pound for pound, the greatest football player that ever played in the National Football League has been Jerry Rice, especially at the wide receiver position. It's a lot to go into that, in my opinion. You got to have your quarterback playing at a high level. Your team has got to be able to believe in you. And most of all, you got to be built a certain way. You never saw Jerry Rice really in the media saying, oh, okay, I'm not getting the ball, I'm complaining. You know what he did after 2 weeks after the season was over with? He went to work. He went to lifting weights. He went to lifting to do what it means to be the best. The honor, the pride. See, a lot of people can talk about, hey, I want to be great. A lot of people can tell you, I need to be great. But it's a little saying from the state of Mississippi, whether or not you're going to put the work in. And when you put the work in, you don't worry about nobody else. Think about the young man's journey. This guy scored 208 touchdowns in the National Football League and is the greatest wide receiver ever played the game. Those facts. And he played with an organization that won at a high level. Several other Hall of Fame players. Montana, lot. It can't get no better. He didn't come from a big school. He came from a school that trained him, a school that made him hungry, a school that let him know that we love you. And I'm going to say this for in the day. The guy that really made him, and there's been a lot of coaches out there that we give kudos to, like Nick Saban. I understand that. Right now, Ryan Day, I understand that. Brett Brown, I understand that. John McKay, I understand that. This is for you, Mr. Travers. You need to do your research on Ati the Gunslinger Cooley, out of the state of Mississippi, my mom's home state. And that's all I got to say about Jerry Rice today. Back to you, the very talented Mr. Harper LeBel.
Well, as a member of the San Francisco 49ers, he ended up being a part of the Oakland Raiders, Seattle Seahawks for a very short period of time. He signed with the Denver Broncos before he retired. And when he retired, the San Francisco 49ers took him back. They gave him a one-day contract. They gave him a check for $1.9 million. And every one of the numbers in that contract had something to do with his draft, his number, the amount of Super Bowls that he won, whatever it was. That they didn't cash the check, but Jerry, as befitting, ended up being a 49er for life and retired as one. NFL records abounding, Super Bowl champion, great catches in games that they won and then they lost. Some of the fantastic games that you go back and you think about against the New York Giants back in those days, San Francisco, Washington, and of course, the games against the Dallas Cowboys. What a difference that Jerry Rice being on the field that he made, and that opponent coaches and players would have to account for him each and every one of those ball games. The numbers speak for themselves. In his career, he played in 303 games. He had 1,549 receptions, 22,895 yards. He had 197 receiving touchdowns. He had 10 rushing touchdowns, 208 total. What an amazing career that Jerry Rice had. And we're glad to honor him here on 100 Yards of Football. We want to thank all of you for tuning in and being a part of the show. We want to thank you for allowing us to give our tribute to some of the great players in our Legends broadcasts, to talk about people that made a difference in the National Football League. So for Vincent Turner, our host and our founder, for Jeremiah Long, our producer and engineer, I'm Harper LeBel. We want to say thank you for tuning in again to our Legends episodes. We appreciate you being a part of it. Have a fantastic day, everybody.